Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfic. Today will be the continuation of Schrödinger's cat. This will be Part 5, Chapter 5, entitled Epilogue. Quote, "Trauma is personal. It does not disappear if it is not validated. When it is ignored or invalidated, the silent screams continue internally, heard only by the one held captive. When someone enters the pain and hears the screams, healing can begin." Danielle Bernock, Emerging with Wings, a true story of lies, pain, and the love that heals. Months later. "What the fuck did you say, Deku? I saw you spinning the bottle with your quirk." "I didn't. I'm not a cheater." Izuku had totally done it, but Bakugo would thank him for that later. He was sure of it. Or maybe not, but he should thank him. Todoroki stared at the bottle in the center with concentration, still trying to understand the principle of the game in vain, but participating anyway, because Izuku was there. "I said playing Truth or Dare with Bakugo was a bad idea." Izuku waved his hand toward Jiro for silence, but his eyes were fixed on Bakugo. It was like challenging a wild animal. "It's just a kiss, Bakugo. Of course you can always give up the challenge if it's too much for you." "Fuck you, Deku. I'm gonna kiss that shitty hair because I'm not a coward." Poor Kirishima just looked around with a flushed expression, trying not to be strangled as Bakugo tugged at his shirt, both of them ignoring Kaminari between the two, who didn't know whether to laugh or run away from there. Izuku wondered if he was seeing a kiss or a punch between mouths. It was hard to say. Kirishima made a startled sound, but grabbed Bakugo's shirt anyway and pulled him even closer. The others around were shouting in disarray. Izuku ignored his own red face with the scene. If he had known that they were so eager, he would have cheated on the game before this. Maybe Bakugo would be less stressed. God knew he needed something good with all the mess that has happened in his life lately. He patted himself on the back for it. Let him never say I'm not a good friend. Even Kaminari looked red now, or maybe it was because they were practically on top of him. "Really? In front of my salad? This is getting very explicit." "I didn't say you needed to use your tongue, Bakugo." Bakugo dropped the silly, dizzy Kirishima on the floor and put his finger in Izuku's face. His voice was terribly serious, even with his hair a mess and the red color of his face at the moment. "I am perfect at everything, Deku." "You shouldn't play this kind of indecent game in the dorms. It goes against everything that should be done in a prestigious place." "Oh, Mom Ida has arrived. The fun is over." Mina threw her hands and everyone started to disperse, apologizing to Ida. Aizawa appeared at the door, looking around suspiciously. His eyes paused on Bakugo and Kirishima. "I don't know what happened before I arrived, but I don't want to know either. Izuku, time to go home." "Oh no, don't go. The nerd lives on campus just across 2 buildings. Stop the fucking drama, round-face." Shoto stood with Izuku without even speaking, his hand holding his. Aizawa put his head back on the door and measured him up and down, but said nothing. Shoto was good at ignoring when his guardian showed his distaste for their excessive attachment on occasion. Izuku was glad to know that Aizawa recognized lost causes. The 3 left the dormitory toward their apartment. It was a situation that started just weeks ago, when the dormitories were set up for student safety after the Bakugo situation. The teachers also moved, and Izuku, of course, had to tag along. It was a good thing. Izuku no longer needed babysitters. When Aizawa had to patrol, he could sleep in the dormitory with Class A, even though the talk that he had received about the rules that he had to follow because of Shoto was something he wanted to forget. Just remembering it made him feel mortified. While the cause of the dormitories being built was a bad circumstance that he didn't like to think about, having people he considered in his own danger was never good for his control. The ensuing camp attack and Bakugo's kidnapping wasn't a very fun week for anyone who had to deal with Izuku. The final situation, though, was all in all pretty good. He had everything and everyone he needed close by. He felt safe. Izuku's room was bigger than before, but not so much. It was crowded with books, notebooks, and a computer because writing with his hands was still a challenge. It still had colored lamps, Moki's bed next to his, and a glass window, making the place always clear. On his side table was a picture of himself and his mom, along with others with Aizawa, Moki, Shoto, Shinzo, the teachers, Nezu, and the Bakugos, and even all of Class A. He was making fond memories, as his mother wanted him to. Shoto went straight to his bed and threw himself there. He was another common point in this environment. Shoto was always there. Izuku laid beside him, staring at the fluorescent stars struck up into the ceiling. Shinzo had painted a cat in the corner with colored paint, and he could see the other doodles from the other students who decided to help him paint his room a few days ago. They had done a terrible job at it, but he loved it anyways. Izuku sighed and leaned closer to Shoto, his quirk on his chest, moving satisfied with their proximity. A warm hand touched his, and he closed his eyes. Nezu said that if I won, I can enter the hero course with a recommendation next year. He felt Shoto move and opened his eyes, finding him staring at him sideways. Really? He nodded, smiling slightly in amusement. I'll have to start in the first year, probably. If I accept, you will be my senpai. And are you going to accept it? He sighed, looking back at the ceiling, and that was the big question. Maybe yes, maybe no. Shoto didn't insist. Instead, he just nodded, and as if his indecision made perfect sense, although deep down he knew he would probably accept it. He didn't think he was a hero, but maybe one day he could be. I know what you're thinking. I already said you're not telepathic, Shoto. The other ignored the joke, sitting on the bed and bringing him along, hands on his face. You are a hero. I'm not. You're always getting into other people's business, Izuku. Just keep quiet and accept it. You're a hero to me. Izuku scowled, but didn't refute it. His quirk swayed happily in his chest. The warmth coming from Shoto was always comforting, but looking at his face this close was even more so, especially when he smiled. Shoto had such a beautiful smile. I don't think it's just my quirk who likes you. Shoto looked at him curiously. I like you very much, Shoto. My quirk has good taste. Shoto's lip quivered into a small smile, but he kept his voice flat. That's good, or I'd feel fooled by these last few months. You're a good napping partner. We're like two elders living the best of life, one nap at a time. Hearing his laugh was so rare, but it always made his heart lighter. Shoto's face approached his softly, his hands touching his cheeks tenderly, a light kiss that made him sigh. He stared at him intently, his eyes very close, the same small smile as ever. For good luck. Izuku felt light, very light, his quirk expanding in his chest, but there was no shortness of breath or pain, just lightness. He pulled Shoto for another kiss, this time long and deep, feeling his hands running through his hair. He heard a meow near his face and frowned. Shoto withdrew his mouth quickly with an anxious voice. Huh? Izuku? Izuku opened his eyes and saw Moki floating indignantly beside him, notebooks and lamps already reaching the ceiling. Shoto gripped his hands tightly, his legs rising off the floor. Izuku sprang to his feet and held him, both looking alarmed. Oh gosh, I think I was too happy. Has Uraraka ever been through this? Shoto stared at him in disbelief, and he couldn't hold back any more. Laughing freely at his expression, he pulled him closer, his body floating in the air still, and he kissed him again. It seems like love can make you float, Shoto. Izuku! He looked over towards the door and saw Aizawa inside his sleeping bag, floating and looking really unimpressed. Do you mind? He burst out laughing again. He could get used to this kind of happiness. Izuku descended the stairs, 2 at a time, the laundry basket floating beside him. He could smell the katsudon, a nostalgia pounding in his chest. Aizawa had finally returned, and he brought food. Someone is excited. Yagi-san! He smiled, and he saw the giant man sitting at the dining table, a cup of tea in front of him, as Aizawa opened the food package. Young Midoriya, I decided to pay a visit. He smiled excitedly, but before he could run to the man, Aizawa cut him off. Dirty laundry in the laundry first, and go wash your hands. He pouted, but obeyed anyway, listening intently to the conversation in the other room in the process, something about Mirio and the last case of an internship, which had caused a stir in recent weeks and made Aizawa stay away from a long time. There was someone in the hospital that he needed to see about an uncontrolled quirk. That sure brought some memories. Izuku knew Mirio, not only because he was the older student who protected the others from him when he lost his control that first time that he saw Bakugo, but because of his connection with Yagi. Months after the situation in the clearing, the hero had made him a proposal which he had refused. There wasn't much surprise from the hero for his refusal, but he said he wouldn't forgive himself if he didn't try. Izuku was flattered that he had confided in him, found him capable, but didn't regret the refusal. Mirio had been a good choice in his eyes. It helped that the older student visited him quite often. He enjoyed trying to cheer up Izuku if he had noticed him down for whatever reason. Mirio was essentially a good person. Maybe that's why even Aizawa liked him. He came back almost running and heard a laugh from Yagi at that. He gave the skinny body a quick hug and received a pat on the head in return. Aizawa rolled his eyes at them, but Izuku knew that he was smiling. A little, perhaps. He was smiling inside. He was sure about that, at least. After dinner, we have something to talk about. About what? Someone else who might be living in this house soon. He stared at his guardian curiously, but also cautiously. He looked at Yagi in consideration and noticed him turn red. No, you gremlin, it's not him. Her name is Eri. Aizawa sighed and sat at the table. Problem child. When Izuku found out about Eri's situation, everything she went through, a sense of camaraderie hit him deeply. Eri, whose uncontrolled quirk on awakening had caused her father to cease to exist, who had been so hurt and used by others until she was rescued. Eri, who hated and feared her quirk so much that she firmly believed it was a curse. Izuku knew there wasn't much that he wasn't going to do for her. Aizawa must have known that too. The man knew Izuku more than anyone. It only took 5 seconds when he saw her, his quirk expanding in his chest in curiosity and affection, pulling a breeze on her face when she was hidden behind Mirio, clutching at his pant leg. It was not unlike what Izuku used to do with Aizawa in the beginning. Well, he still did it sometimes. Big, cautious red eyes stared at him as he smiled, kneeling to show her Moki in his arms. She looked at Mirio, then at Aizawa until she finally got up the courage. The small, curious hand lifted slowly, sinking into the white fur, eyes widening at the purring vibration. She looked at Izuku, and there was a strange understanding between the two. Izuku never imagined it was possible to love someone so fast and so easy. From there he could see the fireflies on campus, among the trees in the hallway that they covered. From afar there was a dormitory entrance in the main building. Usually in this position he could send Morse code messages with his flashlight to other students in the Class A dorm, especially Shoto. Occasionally he exchanged curses with Bakugo like this, but if Ida saw them doing it, he felt guilty, so he avoided it nowadays. Izuku shifted better on the blanket, his back against the roof, Moki on his lap. Inside his chest his quirk was pulsated, and it was happy. Without all the previously negativity that was related to her, he could better understand that feeling now, and that he was not trying to choke it at all costs. He hadn't been able to recreate what Aizawa had said after he fought Stain yet, but with Tokiyami's help, he could already see it, expanding inside his chest like a balloon, opening to leak through his pores, taking shape around him, whitish and warm, surrounding him like a blanket. Like his mom's hugs. I won't let them hurt you anymore. He touched his chest and he smiled. Maybe his quirk wasn't broken after all. They just needed to live with each other. What are you doing up here, problem child? Izuku looked down and saw Aizawa with his head out of the window, looking at him in exasperation. It's a beautiful night. The man rolled his eyes and mumbled something, but soon he had his legs out the window, easily climbing to the roof with him. What are you thinking about with that face? He laughed at the suspicious question, but it was fair. Izuku had no good track record in making good decisions. My quirk? The man looked at him with interest, lying tired beside him. Eri must have been sleeping since Moki was here with him. Today must have been a good night for her. The cat always seemed to know when the little girl needed her, just as she always knew with Izuku. It was common for Moki to bring him to Eri. The first nights had been hard. He remembered that his had been, too, but luckily Eri, like him, had a group of people that were here for her. She would be fine. She had Aizawa. Aizawa always made things better. Izuku opened the blanket and settled some things at his legs, receiving a satisfied sigh. And? Maybe it's not exactly like Dark Shadow, but similar, in parts. That doesn't answer much. Your quirk makes no sense. Izuku pouted. He moved closer and received a pat on the head. Problem child, with his problem quirk, who is my problem now. Good thing erasers are good for erasing problems. He received a painful pinch on his nose for that one, but he regretted nothing. Aizawa put his hands behind his head and observed with interest the pillows and sheets, the lamps, and the plush toys scattered on the roof. So this is where you and Eri hide. She likes to see the fireflies. Aizawa rolled his eyes at his defensive tone. And playing on the roof is very safe. You know that my quirk levitates things, right? Just to confirm, with your age and everything. Aizawa tried to grab his nose again, but he hid his face in a laugh. Cheeky little thing. Maybe I should separate you and my students. You're gaining attitude with all their bad influence. You love us. He saw him roll his eyes, but there was no denial there. One arm pulled him closer. Moki, napping on his chest, didn't even stir. He felt safe, satiated as his quirk, light, warm, and satisfied. Izuku no longer dreamed about the door. This concludes Chapter 5. I'll be back with the last chapter, Chapter 6, for you guys here shortly as well. Hope you all enjoying this one, and as always, thank you so much for listening.